There's two key differences between sorting and filtering. Sorting rearranges existing content, and filtering removes content out of the view. So they're similar, but not quite the same. And this always causes a lot of conversations and theories and different approaches to how you would handle filtering and sorting different kinds of content when you're really manipulating the data. If you think of it as manipulating the data, then sorting and filtering both kind of fall under that category. So I want to walk you through a couple of mainstream apps and show you how they're handling sorting and filtering. And then I want to walk you through a range of simple to complex projects as well. All right, first let's take a look at this Amazon app. This is just a search result view for the Sony ZV-1. And you can see here, they actually just recently changed this, but right here, all of their filters are actually listed out here. So prime and delivery, category, review, and then if I just hit play, and we can kind of swipe through each one of these. So we're looking at more filters. And then notice here at the very end, they have sort by featured, whereas every other one has category, review, more filters. But this one, they are explicitly saying sort by featured. Sorting is going to take that existing information and rearrange it by however you select it. So featured items, price high to low, price low to high, so on and so forth. So in this Amazon example, all of these filters are kind of broken out, and they have different selection mechanisms for category and review and different things. They provide contextual filters for each one of those subsections. But overall, it's kind of like really accessible. Everything's showing. You can read all of this, and it's actually quite busy, but it's also very, very useful when you're sifting through tons and tons of data. Now we'll take a look at this Nike app, which has a much different aesthetic. They go for the simple, clean, black and white look. And let's take a look at what happens when we go to men's clothing. And then we're going to go to tops and t-shirts. Let's back up just a tiny bit here, like right in there. All right, notice here on tops and t-shirts, we do have a little bit of a category filter. So right now it's on all, and we have all these different shirts, but we could also filter them by graphic t-shirts or long sleeve t-shirts. So we don't have to choose category. It's already broken up and listed for us. And there's not a button that says filter by. They just break it out into tabs because you're already in the tops and t-shirts category. Let's just list all these categories out in this horizontal fashion. Assume that people are going to look for either graphic t-shirts, long sleeve, and they want to choose by category. So they're making an assumption, whether it's based on their design intuition or on data, that they're going to list everything by category like that. And that's how they're going to approach it. But what if I want to filter by color, or if I want to sort by price? Well, you can see up here in the top, they've got this tiny little icon here that kind of looks like, a little slider, things where you would, adjust some settings. So they have that, and they're tucking everything into that little menu icon. So right here, they're calling it filter. So when you tap that icon, they're calling it filters. But notice how they have sort is first, and they have their three different sorting mechanisms, then gender, then sizing, then color. And you can see all the different categories are listed right in here. Brand, but not categories of t-shirts. They've intentionally removed the categories and they've put them out in tabs. So there's different ways that you can handle sorting and filtering. You can expose everything in a row of buttons the way Amazon did it, or you can take this approach. Since we're already in tops and t-shirts, we can just tab navigate between all the different subcategories. But if we want more granular detail to search for color, we can put everything into that icon. And that's another perfectly reasonable way to do it. Just from a general perspective, sort is typically more commonly put underneath filter as opposed to the other way around. It's not going to be that common where you say sort all of this information and you tap sort and you have an option to filter by color or filter by category or brand. That's not typically the proper hierarchy when it comes to sorting and filtering. Filter is usually the main prominent call to action when it comes to modifying those results, and sort is kind of plays second fiddle. Not less important, but sometimes it's placed underneath. So take that for what it's worth. The placement and the design of the sorting and filtering mechanisms in your design project, if they exist, that's going to be a UX discussion and even a business discussion, depending on the analytics of the app or even the opinions of the people involved on the team. So if you can make yourself a part of those conversations and a part of those discussions, you'll be better equipped to make those stylistic visual design decisions, knowing all the information that exists. Because if you just start designing a sorting and filtering system without having conversations with the UX team or the information architect or anyone else, even if those things don't exist on your team, even the stakeholder, the business side of things, they're going to know. People really love to buy graphic t-shirts, but they don't buy quite as many long sleeve t-shirts, but we have them, so we need to sell them. So things like that, little bits and pieces of information that you can collect from stakeholders who probably already know a lot about what people look for and what people are searching for. You can use that information while you're designing the interface to make better decisions for your sorting and filtering mechanisms. All right, so let's take a look at this SmartLine app here. I want to show a very simple little filtering system here. Notice on the conversations here, we've got these phone calls, we have these text messages, and we have voicemails. But right here at the very top, we have this all with a little down arrow. So if I just play this prototype here and you can see you kind of scroll through this thing. If I want to access I'm only looking for text messages. Well, I could just tap this little area up here and I can either show everything by saying show all. I can show only the calls, show only the text, or show only the voicemails. And the copywriting right here is very specific. I'm not saying filter by, I'm just saying all with an arrow pointing down. It could say show all, that could be an option, but we were trying to go for something very clean, very minimal. Only what needed to be here was there. And so now if I tap this, you can see that all is pulling from this one selection. So all is selected, so all is showing right there. If I tap it again, you could imagine if I were to tap calls right here, it would say calls, and then I would have only the calls and they would be filtered. Now, you could argue that this drop down arrow is not that noticeable, but that's okay. We're okay with this on this particular view because in general, we were anticipating most people not really needing to filter by calls and messages and voicemails. They were just going to have the ability to just scroll through. And if they wanted to do that, they could very quickly just tap and change it. But it didn't need to be really prominent and called out in a big way like the way the Amazon or the categories of the t-shirts for the Nike app were. So in this example on this Shiplify responsive web app, someone at a manufacturing plant, say Rigid Tools here, they want to ship all of their tools from Dothan, Alabama to the Home Depot in Cincinnati. And they're looking at all of these carriers and these trucking companies that could possibly handle this delivery for them. As you might guess, shipping logistics when it comes to big transfer truck, big trailers, and big shipments that are going all across the country, that can be quite complex. So when you're trying to find someone who can handle the type of products that you're shipping, there's lots and lots and lots of detail that goes into that. So in this particular example, there are these guides that the carriers provide. There are different types of modes. There are sub-modes. There's terms, whether it's prepaid or collect. All of this information that goes into these different shipments, a lot of it is hard to understand unless you're talking to a subject matter expert. But you can see here, it needs to be extremely clear in terms of what they're searching for, because most every detail here is highly critical to the type of price that they'll get. Some of it might be hazardous material. There's just so much information that has to be listed here. Since this is a responsive web app, we also have to put all of these filters onto the mobile screen. Over here on the mobile version, you can see I've got all of these same filters: service mode, sub mode, date and time, terms, equipment. We've also got things like hazardous material, all these different line items, adding a secondary line item. Like this is form within a filter, within a page, and just tons of information. I want to point this particular example out because this is how we're handling the filter system. We have this huge button here. We want to make it unmistakable, like filter is right here, and tapping this filter button is going to trigger this entire view. And this entire view is really what happens in this full left rail system. Now, I do have two different design styles, and this was designed back in 2014. So looking back, I probably would not have two different styles for mobile versus desktop. I probably would have stuck with this one style. But regardless of that, you can see that if you imagine this very easily turns into a mobile screen, just a full width mobile screen. So a lot of times when you're transitioning between desktop and mobile, all you really need to do, if you're not going to break out any of those filters, is just provide an access like a button like this that would then trigger that same view. It's not impossible to take a left column and then hide it on a mobile device and then call it and make it visible when you tap on a button to bring that into view. It's a great way to kind of go between that small screen and that large screen, especially if you have the same layout and the same view. Sometimes you might change the type size depending on mobile screen or not. But at the end of the day, you can take a really complex system like this and have those filters. And as you add those filters, if you want them visible, we're showing, okay, these filters are the ones that I've selected. There's a sub mode, a service mode, there's deliver accounts. And so you can actually X all of these off without going back into the filter. So we're trying to provide an easy way to take these off and to see what I've selected, because all of these are really important. So again, this is highly subject to the type of information that we're designing for. But you can see, like, just from a visual perspective, I want these filters to be kind of toned down. I want them to sit in the background. And then these search results, they have these white cards that are lifted off of the background. So I have this kind of juxtaposition between background, things that are touching the background are filters, things that are sitting on top of the background are search results. Here's another example on this screen where I've got all of these. As I choose the different modes over here, they're going to pop up, and then I have the ability to either change them here or I could change them here. And then there's also the option to save this. But I want to point out that the most important parts are kind of, they're brighter than the rest. We've got our search fields here, and then we've got our search results here. We're trying to elevate that content above the filters so everything is very clear, because there's lots of information that's going on here. And lastly, I want to pull up this BabySense project again. This was one of those shopping comparison sites. So if you're trying to find a stroller, this site would bring in all those strollers and bring in the best price. And then it would work from kind of an affiliate link model. So this was a pretty complex project, and we're designing from scratch. So I designed wireframes first, and I'm just focusing on layout and typography. That's all I'm looking at. And I'm not even worried about doing a nice custom font or some kind of alternative font. I think here I probably just use San Francisco. I'm putting a border around everything because the law of common region will kind of trump the negative space. So anytime I'm doing a wireframe, I'm typically going to put a box around everything just so it's so explicitly clear. It doesn't make for the most amazing visual aesthetic, but when you're designing these wireframes, it just kind of helps provide that context for what's inside of what border. So you can see here, I've got the search field, and then I've got filter and sort buttons. So basically all of this area is manipulating the search view down below. Whether we're filtering or sorting, or we're changing the view from a list form to a grid form, it's all changing that content. So I wanted all of this to kind of be in that same little box area. And we're showing, this many results. And then I've also got some alternate views here. So if this is the list view, this was adding to a watch list and getting a price alert. But I also realized that this might not be that intuitive for everyone. So I provided them an additional layout over here that really just shifted these buttons from the side down underneath. So we had a lot of conversations about whether or not someone would know to add to watch list or not. So I gave them two options that they could experiment with. And sometimes it's necessary. If you're unsure of what's going to perform well, or if someone's really going to understand the icons or not, you could try one that's simple, but then try another one that is a backup that is kind of the safest bet. And so right here, filter is going to trigger this list right here. We've got categories, top brands, we've got price range, color, sales and deals. You know, this huge unending list of filters are all available right here. And then sort, we could have put sort inside of here, but we chose to do sort as its own small item. So we're just sorting either alphabetically or by price, etc., etc. It's not really that important to have all the information if we know we're going to use some type of smaller overlay instead of a huge filter pop-up. Looking at these side by side, this mobile view is the exact same content as this left rail right here. It's not impossible to put huge amounts of desktop information into a mobile screen, especially when you're kind of transitioning from, okay, on this screen, we have it all laid out, and you can see here sort. Functionality for sort stays exactly the same, whereas filter, as you get smaller, filter is going to pop in beside sort and will give you this access to this new layout. And then going even larger, we have that same rail. It's just a matter of now we can fit 4 wide versus 2 wide, but that filter and the sort is kind of all staying right in that same area. So there's going to be lots of different possibilities depending on what you're designing for. You might need a really simple sort and filter system, kind of like that SmartLine project, or you might need something a lot more complex where you have it exposed at all times. Or maybe it's something like the Amazon or Nike where it's broken up into different pieces and you can have access to part of it that's just shown by default, or when it's tucked into a tiny icon and everything just kind of comes up into its own screen. Okay, for sorting and filtering homework, I want you to add that functionality to your fictitious app if possible. I realize that depending on the content that you might have been working with already, it might not be possible to add a sort and filter to what exists. So you could take information from any of these designs that I showed you before. I've got all of those download links listed down below, so you're welcome to grab any of that information or take screenshots from Amazon, and you could kind of almost create your own little e-commerce search results if you don't have proper content to work with. Because if you don't have that information to work with, it's going to be really, really challenging to do an exercise like this. So once you have that information to work with, I want you to design a filter and sort button, or filter, or however you decide to do it. Most of the time, you're going to want that button to be kind of in that secondary or tertiary ballpark where it's close to the background color. It's very clear that it's a button, but it's not standing out as a primary call to action. And so once you have that designed, I want you to make 3 different variations of that system. I want you to do one that has a mobile view that uses like an inline filtering system, similar to either the Nike categories or maybe even the Amazon example where everything's kind of listed out and you swipe, or some kind of small control panel where it's all listed with the content all together. Secondly, let's use a simplified version of that where a simple button or an icon triggers that mobile view. And then third, if you're up for it, you don't have to do this, but I think it would be really cool if you design a big version similar to the Shiplify or the BabySense layouts, where you did have, you know, a lot of filters either on the left rail, maybe they're all at the top, depending on the content that you're designing with. So show how it could work, 2 different mobile versions and 1 larger desktop version. And keep in mind, you know, the content is more important than the filter. So make sure when your colors or your modules, make sure that your content is sitting further forward by use of, you know, more contrasting colors, and then some of your other stuff can kind of sit back with lighter grays and things like that. Just make sure that it passes contrast accessibility, but get started on that filtering and sorting homework, and I can't wait to see what you come up with.